You're severancing the trees from the land, and it's the only severance tax in Georgia. And so this severance tax, and I use that in quotation marks, it's not really a severance tax, it is a tax on the trees that are cut, is based on, as the other two speakers have said, 100%. Other taxes in Georgia are generally calculated on 40%. So if you look at the sheet on your desk, you'll see that it would be quite a savings when a person sells their timber to pay the 40%. And we ran some numbers, and no matter how small or how large, that savings of paying the tax based on 40% works out to be enough to pay for seedlings for replanting. So it makes it a great opportunity for our tree farmers in the state of Georgia to harvest, replant, and keep going and making us #1 for forestry in Georgia. I strongly urge your support of this bill. It's a long time coming, and it's a fairness bill, and it will really help our tree farmers in the state of Georgia. With that, Mr. Speaker, I'll yield the well, and I ask for your favorable consideration.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this resolution now be adopted? All those in favor of the adoption of the resolution will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines.
They're still in a holding pattern.
Have all members what purpose does Chairman Dickey rise?
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to invoke Rule 133 on this.
Gentleman has that right, and the journal will so reflect. What purpose does Representative Wade rise?
I need to do the same thing.
Gentleman has that right, and the journal will so reflect. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the adoption of House Resolution 686, the ayes are 166, the nays are 0. This resolution, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 733.
House Bill 733 by Representative Smith of the 18th, to be entitled an act to amend Code Section 3363(3) of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to definitions regarding guaranteed asset protection waivers, so as to revise the definition of a guaranteed asset protection waiver. This bill having been referred to the Committee on Insurance, that committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Representative Tyler Paul Smith to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of this body, I bring to you today House Bill 733, which seeks to make improvements to the Guaranteed Asset Protection Waiver Model legislation in Georgia. Just so you know, GAP is an acronym for Guaranteed Asset Protection, and it can actually get you out of a deep financial bind if your vehicle may be stolen or totaled while you still owe payments on your car loan beyond the actual value of the car, aka you're upside down or underwater on it. Current law contains a statutory framework for offering GAP waivers in Georgia. This bill retains that framework and would additionally allow a gap waiver to provide a credit toward the purchase of a replacement vehicle. The bill also allows a gap waiver to be offered without an additional charge. And, Mr. Speaker, that's the gist of the bill. I'll yield for any questions.
You do not appear to have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask y'all's favorable consideration.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Yep. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the passage of House Bill 733, the ayes are 166, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 202.
House Bill 202 by Representative Hitchens, the 161st, and others, to be entitled an act to amend Article 10 of Chapter 21 of Title 15 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to the Georgia Drivers Education Commission so as to increase the additional penalty for violation of the traffic laws or ordinances under Joshua's Law. This bill having referred to the Committee on Motor Vehicles, that committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Chairman Hitchens to present the bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise today on behalf of House Bill 202, better known as Joshua's Law. I presented this bill 2 years ago, and it passed here 150 to 9, but the folks on the other side of this building didn't get it through, so I'm back again today. I didn't do it last year because they had a problem over at the Governor's Office of Highway Safety with a federal audit, and they asked that I not do it while that was ongoing. In 2005, Joshua's Law was originally created with a surcharge of 5% on all traffic citations in Georgia to establish funding to support driver's education programs throughout the state. In the Great Recession, that 5% was reduced to 1.5%, with the other 3.5% going into the general fund. The 1.5% creates about $2.5 million a year. And I have to apologize here. When I was in Motor Vehicles Committee, I said that that money was still going into the general fund, and that's not the case. I asked the Governor's Office of Highway Safety to research it, and what they found out was about 3 years ago that money was diverted, and it's no longer a surcharge. So what we're asking today is to go from 1.5% to add another 1.5%. As I'll explain later, these are sought-after positions, and we don't have nearly enough money in there to satisfy that need. This bill also reflects the 2020 constitutional amendment that was championed by our friend Jay Powell that mandates that the fees stay in a trust fund and be used only for the purpose that they are collected. The scholarships are awarded on a 3-tier priority system. The first priority is given to grant scholarship applications when a child or dependent of a public safety professional or member of the United States military is killed in the line of duty. The second priority is given to scholarship applicants who can demonstrate a need based on family income. The financial need eligibility is based on 125% of the free and reduced price school eligibility. For a family of three, the gross household income would be about $49,000 or under $1,000 per month gross. Third priority is for all other applicants. There's such a demand that no other applicants are ever considered for this grant. The one addition that I made this year is that this legislation adds consideration for those aged 18 to 21 who have left the foster or protective custody of DFACS. The program is for children from 15 to 17. And the reason I added that is I know a little bit about the program, and when you turn 18 years old in foster care, you get released, and if you don't have some means or some job, you're kind of left on your own. If you don't have a driver's license, you don't have the ability to get a job. So this would assist foster care and children under DFACS protection in obtaining a driver's license, and therefore help them get a job. Each month, the program runs out of money because demand for the scholarships is so high and student applications are denied, and the third tier is never reached. The program is open to all public schools, technical colleges, universities, and other state-owned driver education programs, and privately owned commercial for-profit driving schools and nonprofit organizations and private schools. The program consists of 36 hours, 30 hours in a classroom, and 6 hours on the road. That's essentially what happens if you don't take this program. You're supposed to do 30 hours online and 6 hours behind the wheel, typically with your parents. Now, some parents, all they have to do is sign an affidavit. Some parents do give them the training, other parents don't. So, in conclusion, what I'd like to say is the sunset on this is June 30th this year. If this bill doesn't pass, the 17 years that this has been in effect, and all the research shows that the children that go through this have higher scores on their tests when they get their driver's license. They have less violations, moving violations. They have less accidents. They have less injuries and less fatalities. So it's been a great program. I hate to see it. I hate to see it fall by the wayside because of not putting in the 1.5% surcharge. If there are no questions, I'll yield and ask for your favorable consideration.
Do you yield for questions?
I yield.
Chair recognizes Chairman Dempsey to your right for a question.
Thank you, Chairman Hitchens. I just want to tell you that I know Joshua's family. His mother is a constituent that lives very close to me, and I've texted her. She's watching us. She's so proud of what you are doing. But this is a very strong life-saving measure for children, and especially to extend this opportunity to foster children as they age out. Thank you for your work on this.
Thank you. That wasn't much of a question.
You'd rather have that than a question.
Oh, I would rather have it, certainly. And Katie and I have discussed this before. I've talked to some of the family members, and they certainly are advocating for this.
Chair recognizes Representative Prince to your left for a question.
Does the gentleman yield?
Yield.
Is it true that this bill will cost any traffic fine by any citizen an additional 1.5%?
That's correct.
Thank you.
But that's 2% less than it was in effect for about 14 years.
You have no further questions.
I yield the will.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. What purpose does Representative Momtahan rise?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to House Rule number 133, I'd ask to be recused from this vote.
Gentleman has that right, and the Journal will so reflect. What purpose does Representative McLaurin rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
You really are training up to be in the Senate, aren't you? Today, it's a crash course.
Yes, sir. Parliamentary inquiry is...
State your inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is it not true that despite the noble purpose of this bill, or the bill, yeah, it would fall into the category of what I call sort of the normal grind of increasing the scope of penalties, punishment under a criminal justice system, and that notwithstanding the history on the amount of this fine, putting the incidence of who's paying for this on the people who get traffic tickets in our municipal courts is not the way to fund government. Is that not true, Mr. Speaker?
Well, I'm sure the gentleman believes that to be true. What purpose does Representative Prince rise?
Pursuant to House Rule 133, I ask to be excused from this vote.
Gentleman has that right, and the Journal will so reflect. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines on the passage of House Bill 202. The ayes are 139. The nays are 27. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Resolution 842.
House Resolution 842 by Representative Cantrell of the 22nd and others, proposing an amendment to the Constitution so as to restrict the ability of the General Assembly to increase the salary of state senators and representatives, and to establish a salary for state senators and representatives equal to 60% of the median household income in Georgia. This resolution has been referred to the Committee on Budget and Fiscal Affairs Oversight. That committee recommends that this resolution be adopted by Rules Committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Representative Cantrell to present the bill. Resolution.
Colleagues, I bring to you a very simple constitutional amendment today. It's a bipartisan effort with 3 Democratic sponsors and 3 Republican sponsors. Now, I believe that we're elected to represent the best interest of our constituents. They've elected us to make hard choices on their behalf, and I normally don't support abdicating that responsibility and putting it back on the voters. However, today we're looking at an issue that represents a conflict of interest for all of us. If we were to want to vote ourselves a pay adjustment, we would all need to use Rule 133 or the Chairman Mike Choka's rule and excuse ourselves from the vote. So this constitutional amendment protects us from having to recuse ourselves. The last time the General Assembly had the courage to adjust their salary was all the way back in the 1990s, with the exception of a small COLA in the 2000s, one-time COLA adjustment. So let me be clear. We are not voting to give ourselves a pay adjustment. If this amendment passes, the General Assembly will no longer have the ability to give ourselves a pay adjustment in the future. This amendment would allow Georgians to vote to remove the General Assembly's ability to give ourselves a pay adjustment and would set our pay at 60% of the median household income in Georgia. It would also protect the General Assembly from ever becoming a full-time job and would ensure that we remain a citizen legislature. You may wonder why 60%. The National Conference of State Legislatures rated Georgia's legislators as ones that typically work the equivalent of at least 2/3 of a full-time job. Given this information, I chose a number slightly lower than that amount that is kind of an industry standard for determining what is a part-time position. As this General Assembly continues to enact policies that make life better for Georgians, the result would be that the median income in our state would rise, which would result in the compensation of General Assembly members rising proportionally in the same way. As Georgians do better, the General Assembly would do better. Additionally, we would never have to address this issue again. The question on the ballot reads this way: shall the Constitution of Georgia be amended to restrict the ability of the General Assembly to increase the salary of state senators and representatives and establish a standard salary for such individuals equal to 60% of the median household income of Georgia? And that is the constitutional amendment, House Resolution 842. Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to yield for questions if there are any.
You do have a question if you care to yield.
I'll be happy to yield.
Chair recognizes Representative Dukes to your left for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the gentleman yield?
Certainly. Yes.
I'll ask you at your seat.
I'm sorry?
I will ask you at your seat.
Oh, okay.
You have another question or two if you care to yield.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'll yield for one more.
Chair recognizes Chairman Dubnik to your left for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the gentleman yield?
Certainly.
You mentioned that we would no longer have the ability to control our own pay, and I certainly understand that. But would this body have the authority or the power to make a change to that 60% number?
Certainly, it would take a constitutional amendment in order to do so. So it
Thank
would
you.
be the same level of acceptance as what we're doing here today.
You have one more question you might want to take.
I'll take it, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes the chairman of the Committee on Information and Audits, Chairman Hogan. To your left
Does
for
the
a
gentleman
question.
yield?
Yes, sir, I do.
What is 60% of the median income?
Currently, median income is about $58,000 in Georgia, so it would be around $35,000.
Thank you.
With that, Mr. Speaker, I'll yield the well.
Gentleman has yielded the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to withdrawing the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is withdrawn. Is there any objection to adopting the substitute offered by the Committee on Rules? The chair hears none. The Rules Committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this resolution now be adopted? All those in favor of the adoption of the resolution will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the adoption of House Resolution 842, the ayes are 136, the nays are 33. This resolution, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore adopted. Clerk will read the caption to House Resolution 820.
House Resolution 820 by Representative England of the 116th. A resolution honoring the life of Mr. James L. Boss and dedicating an intersection in his memory. This bill having referred to the Committee on, this resolution having been referred to the Committee on Transportation. That committee recommends that this resolution be adopted by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes the chairman of the Transportation Committee, Chairman Jaspers, to present the resolution. All right, let's have a little quiet now.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, will you rise with me as we honor 19 Georgians who are being honored with the naming of a road or bridge after them. Especially want to thank our analyst, Abby Day, who works on this tirelessly and makes it very easy for all of us. This resolution, as you notice, starts off with Chairman Terry England, who named an intersection in Barrow County after Mr. James Boss, who settled in Barrow County in 1866, cultivated over 600 acres of farmland, was considered the largest farmer in the area. And he has many descendants still living there, including his great-great-grandson, Chairman England, and his family. Included in this resolution, Representative Ronna Bernal for naming part of State Route 139 for Gold Star Fathers, for the acknowledgement of their losses suffered when they lose children in service to this great country. Representative Ronna Bernal for naming part of State Route 54 for the Arnold Fountain Professional Club that engages members who strive to promote professionalism and civic pride and elevate major issues in the field of education. Representative Sheila Jones for naming State Route 70 for the Reverend Joseph Jones, who served this country in the United States Navy and served as a minister to the Norwood Tabernacle Baptist Church. Chairman Wes Cantrell for naming portions of State Route 372 for Mr. Roger William Cavender, who served his country with the United States Army during World War II, storming the beaches of Normandy, and fought the Battle of the Bulge. Chairman Penny Houston, recognizing Mr. Charlie D. Rogers, served his country in the United States Navy during World War II and lived his commitment to protecting the people and ideas of the United States. Chairman Penny Houston for recognizing Lieutenant Hugh Moore, a native of Nashville, who served as a United States Army pilot and flew at least 8 missions over Germany during World War II and went missing in action over enemy territory on July 28, 1942. Representative Rebecca Mitchell for naming an intersection on State Route 78 for Specialist Etienne J. Murphy, tragically lost his life serving with the United States Army in Syria while conducting combat operations. Chairman Eddie Lumpson for naming an intersection of US 27 and State Route 1 for Judge Larry Salmon, who earned a reputation as a clear thinker, hard worker, and whose decisions were governed by the rules of honesty and fair play. Representative Brad Thomas for naming an intersection on 575, Interstate 575 and Exit 11 for Officer Joseph W. Burson, who served his community in Holly Springs as a police officer and was tragically killed during a routine traffic stop. Caucus Secretary Bruce Williamson for naming a bridge on State Route 11 for Sergeant Terry Savage, served his nation flying reconnaissance missions in the Vietnam War, was a member of the United States Army, was killed in an aircraft accident. Representative Beth Kemp for naming a bridge on State Route 109 for Rex J. Yerkes, who is devoted to preserving the environment and passionate about conservation efforts on behalf of Pike County residents. And his contributions were instrumental to numerous organizations such as the Lions Club and Cattlemen's Association. Chairman Lee Hawkins for naming this portion of State Route 53 to Bobby Sue Honey, while en route from one shift to another, was killed while assisting a motorist stuck in a ditch after a tornado had littered the roadway with debris. Chairman Mike Chokas naming the portion of State Route 26 for Sheriff Horace Irving Snyder, serving as Sheriff of Marion County for 27 and a half years, the longest tenure of any sheriff in that county's history. Representative Rebecca Mitchell named the intersection on State Route 8 for Specialist Adam Harrell, served this country in the United States Army 82nd Airborne, where he's recognized as an expert marksmanship badge and a reputation as a soldier willing to mentor and support others. Chairman Eddie Lumpson for naming the intersection on State Route 48 for Mr. Bobby Lee Cook, known as the Dean of Criminal Defense Lawyers, who will long be remembered for his advocacy of people of all walks of life and his commitment to legal profession through his mentorship of other attorneys. Chairman Alan Powell for naming a bridge on State Route 51 for Mr. Fred Pullman, committed his life to Franklin County, Georgia. He served as an EMT for the Royston Ambulance Service and served as Justice of the Peace and became Deputy Sheriff in '79, a position he held for more than 2 decades. Chairman Terry England for naming a portion of State Route 211 for Cecius Milner. Served 18 years as the nation's armed services, 6 of which were in World War II, returned to civilian life and ran a successful farm raising Black Angus and serving in his church. And Chairman Bill Hitchens by naming a portion of State Route 144 for Sheriff Quentin Rush. Served as a state trooper and served 28 years before being elected as Sheriff of Tattnall County and serving that post for 20 years, ensuring integrity, dedication to sound principles of law enforcement. Mr. Speaker, if we can, as members, take a moment of silence and recognize these 19 Georgians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, members.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this resolution now be adopted? All those in favor of the adoption of the resolution will vote aye. All those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. What purpose does Representative Walensky rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is it not true that this year one of my goals was to remove a name from a road for making flagrant anti-Semitic comments, but I did learn that it is a committee rule that we do not remove names here in Georgia from roads. Thank you.
If the gentleman so states, I think he's correct on that. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines on the passage of, or the adoption of House Resolution 820. The ayes are 173. The nays are 0. This resolution, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Resolution 822.
House Resolution 822 by Representative Stevens, the 164th and others. A resolution stating Georgia's opposition to the shark fin trade. This resolution has been referred to the Committee on Game, Fish, and Parks. That committee recommends that this resolution be adopted by a committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Chairman Stevens to present the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, H.R. 822 is a very simple proposition that asks Georgia to show its opposition to the practice of shark finning For those of you that don't know, some of these countries do this routinely, and it's a matter of catching a shark, cutting the fins off, and then throwing the live fish back into the ocean, essentially to die. This does not prohibit those legal fishers that keep the fins and then consume the meat or sell the meat or whatever. That's a different altogether. If you will, the saltwater recreation fishing in Georgia, especially down where I live, is about a $344 million operation for saltwater fishing, and there's 3,800 jobs associated with it. Mr. Speaker, I ask that we pass and unanimously support H.R. 822, and I'll yield the well if there's no questions.
You have a question if you care to yield.
Yes, sir.
Chair recognizes Representative Hutchinson. To your right for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to make sure I understand. So if I'm catching a shark and I take off the fin but keep the carcass, that's okay?
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the well.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this resolution now be adopted? All those in favor of the adoption of the resolution will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. And the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the adoption of the resolution, the ayes are 171, the nays are 0. This resolution, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore adopted.
Clerk will read the captioned House Resolution 593. House Resolution 593.
House Resolution 593 by Representative Hogan of the 179th and others, a resolution compensating Mr. Dennis Arnold Perry. This resolution having been referred to the Committee on Appropriations, that committee recommends that this resolution be adopted by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Chairman Hogan to present the resolution.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the House. I bring before you today House Resolution 593 seeking compensation for Dennis Arnold Perry. Mr. Perry was wrongfully convicted for murders of Harold and Thelma Swain and spent more than 20 years wrongfully incarcerated in prison. The DNA and other evidence now has proven his innocence. The GBI felt him to be innocent. Superior Court of Glenn County also found him to be innocent, and the DNA found him to be innocent. The resolution seeks to compensate Mr. Perry for his wrongful imprisonment for $1,230,000. Whereas during his imprisonment, Dennis Arnold Perry was divorced from his wife, lost his home, both of his parents, and his stepfather, and still maintained an exemplary record as a prisoner, serving as a mentor and example for other inmates. So that's the bill, and I appreciate your vote in favor of Mr. Perry. And I yield to Will if there's no questions.
There are no questions.
Thank you.
The gentleman has yielded the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this resolution now be adopted? All in favor of the adoption of the resolution will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machine. Have all members voted? Have all members voted?
Pardon? Oh, wow.
Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the adoption of the resolution. The yeas were 157, the nays were 6. The resolution, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore adopted. Clerk will read the caption to House Resolution 626. House Resolution 626.
House Resolution 626 by Representative Holcomb of the 81st and others, a resolution compensating Kerry Robinson. This resolution having been referred to the Committee on Appropriations. That committee recommends that this resolution be adopted by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Representative Holcomb to present the resolution.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's my honor to present to you House Resolution 626 on behalf of Kerry Robinson. Kerry Robinson was convicted of a crime that he did not commit. He was convicted of a brutal sexual assault based on the testimony of an incentivized informant and based on faulty testimony about DNA by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation during his trial. This was brought to me last fall, and I want to tell you briefly about that. When it was brought to me, I was initially skeptical. As many of you know, I've spent most of the last 7 years working to address or help improve our state's policies in the response to sexual assault. And so to be asked to work on a case where somebody had been convicted, it was something that I hadn't gone through before. And my immediate reaction was not terribly positive, to be very candid with you. But I said, I'll listen, I'll hear you. And I said, I need to do my homework. So I got the transcript, I called the prosecutor, I talked to the defense attorney, and there's no doubt in my mind, which is why I'm standing here before you today, that Mr. Robinson spent 18 years of his life in prison for a crime that he did not commit. And the details of that are very simple. At his trial, and I love the GBI, and I think that they typically do great work, but in this case they got it wrong, because at his trial, the expert witness said, with respect to testifying about the DNA evidence, he said, I can't do the math, but it's a very, very low probability that it was anyone other than Kerry Robinson. So based on that representation, that was the corroborating evidence, Mr. Robinson was convicted. He was never identified by the victim, and in fact, I've spent time with Mr. Robinson and his family, and at the Claims Advisory Board hearing, his sister Miranda told me that after Kerry had been indicted, they were at the supermarket and they ran into the victim. His sister knew the victim, his mother knew the victim. They had a conversation. Kerry did not know the victim, and he was only told about it afterwards. The victim did not know who he was and never identified him. So this is a case that is terribly heartbreaking. 18 years of his life gone. We can never truly compensate for that, but we can do something. And one thing that I forgot to say, but it's important for you all to know, is when the math was actually done correctly, Mr. Robinson is African American. When the math actually was done correctly, it's 1,800 times more probable that a random person on the street committed the crime than he did. So he was released. He's now doing very well today, and I have to tell you, getting to know him has been one of the most inspiring things I've ever been able to experience, because he doesn't have any anger in his heart. He always knew that he was innocent, and now that he is free, he just has a really amazing sense of gratitude. And so I hope that with that, we can be supportive of this resolution. Some might say, well, who should pay this price? The prosecutions are made on behalf of the state. The name of the case is always State v. It's the Department of Corrections and state dollars that put people into prison. So I will submit to you it has to be state dollars that help compensate. I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
You have a question. The chair recognizes Chairman Setzler for a question.
Chairman Yield?
Yes.
I asked this question. I know there's some folks that are skeptical about these things, but in this case, as you said, I think very articulately, the state had a duty to this person that the state did not perform. Isn't that true?
Yes.
So if there's members here that are generally skeptical about these kinds of things, this case in particular is one in which the state had a duty that they did not perform. So this might be even seen as more a better candidate for compensation perhaps than even others. Isn't that true?
Yes, thank you.
There are no more questions.
Okay. Thank you.
For what purpose does Representative Gravely rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that if this is one of our own family members or a loved one in our community, someone whose life had been taken away, that we would vote our conscience on this measure?
As the gentleman so states. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which was favorable to the adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this resolution now be adopted? All in favor of the adoption of the resolution will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machine. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the adoption of the resolution, the yeas were 157, the nays were 6. The resolution, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore adopted. Clerk will read the caption to H.R. 732. H.R. 732.
House Resolution 732 by Representative 49th, proposing amendment to the Constitution so as to change the date by which temporary loans for counties, municipalities, and other political subdivisions are payable from the end of the calendar year to the end of the counties, municipalities, or other political subdivisions fiscal year. This bill having referred to the Committee on Governmental Affairs, that committee recommends that this resolution be adopted by a committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Chairman Martin to present the resolution.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I have an item today. It's constitutional amendment that we need to pass to help our local municipalities, primarily our school boards and some of our cities in the metro area, but it could affect each and every one of us. This is to allow governments that have tax anticipation notes. That's a note that a school board would do while they're waiting on their tax revenue to come in, their ad valorem tax, because they're primarily funded by ad valorem tax. We all know tax digests get behind because of protests related to assessments. And when this happens, the tax anticipation notes are currently required to be paid back by December 31st of that calendar year. We have in many cases in the local area here, particularly APS, the Atlanta Public School System in Fulton County, that have tax digests that would normally come out in September, October, and they would have time to collect their taxes. But in cases when the tax digest is late, their tax anticipation notes are due on December 31st. They may not receive their tax revenue until January of the next year. So what this amendment does before the voters is simply ask that those loans be paid back in full within 12 months. Doesn't increase the borrowing power. In fact, it is very clear that they have to pay back if they have any unpaid notes. They can't take another one. So it does not increase the borrowing power. It simply allows our school boards and cities to make use of what is already allowed in the Constitution and pay back the loans over 12 months. Madam Speaker, this is a friendly amendment that will assist our local governments when they need it. And I ask the House's consideration on this amendment. It does take 120 votes. I hope we can all get behind this. If there are technical questions, I would stand for them.
There are no questions.
I yield the well and ask everyone's favorable consideration on H.R. 732.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? Chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this resolution now be adopted? All in favor of the adoption of the resolution will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machine. For what purpose does Representative Smiley rise? He waves. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the adoption of the resolution, the yeas were 165, the nays were 3. The resolution, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore adopted. We're moving on to the next supplemental calendar. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 824. House Bill 824.
House Bill 824 by Representative Cantrell of the 22nd to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 6 and Title 47 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to the Georgia Legislative Retirement System so as to increase the retirement allowance. This bill has been referred to the Committee on Retirement. That committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Chairman Cantrell to present the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, I bring to you House Bill 824. This bill is designed to address the fact that we have overfunded the legislative retirement system for over 20 years. In the current system, there's a disparity between our contribution, which is tied to a percentage of our salary, and our benefit, which is fixed. In other words, our contribution continues to go up, but our benefit remains the same. This bill would convert us to a fixed contribution with a fixed benefit. This has no cost to the taxpayers or the state. The legislative retirement system is funded by our money. It comes out of your income. There's no state dollars involved, no taxpayer money involved in any way. The employer is our state, and they've not contributed to this since before 2000. We currently overfund the legislative retirement system at around 128%. If we adopt this bill today, LRS will continue to be overfunded, but only at around 123%. So it's a modest proposal that ensures long-term success of the LRS while at the same time providing for a more equitable formula and return to retirees. And with that, Madam Speaker, I'll yield for questions if there are any.
You have a question. Chair recognizes Representative Bruce for a question.
Will the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir.
You said we've overfunded it. Are you going to give that money back to the people that paid it?
That's the idea behind this bill, Representative Bruce, is to give some of that money back in a fairer way than how it's being distributed currently.
Will the gentleman yield?
Sure.
How would it be refunded? When are the checks going out?
It's not going to be refunded that way, but it will be given back in a more equitable way to those who've paid into the system. Thank you for your question.
Chair recognizes Chairman Carson for a question.
Does the gentleman yield?
Certainly.
I want to thank you for bringing this forward. Is it not true that this measure does not cost the state any funds whatsoever?
That is accurate. It doesn't cost the state a penny.
And to follow up to my colleagues from Fulton County, is it not true that this basically seeks parity, whereas previously we were contributing a percentage but getting a fixed amount? We're looking more or less for parity here. And if we did nothing, if we did not adopt this measure, then the amount of overfunding in the LRS system would continue to increase. Is that not true?
That is true. The number of our contribution would go way up next year, but the benefit would have remained the same.
And is it not further true? Does the gentleman further yield?
Yes.
And is it not further true that once we adopt this, the program will still be well overfunded, still not cost the state anything?
That is
not
correct. It's a very modest proposal, a big step in the right direction, but there's still a lot more left to be done.
Thank you.
With that, Madam Chair, I'll yield the well.
The gentleman has yielded the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All in favor of the passage of the bill will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no. And the clerk will unlock the machine. Have all members voted? For what purpose does Representative McDonald rise? He waves. For what purpose does Representative Holly rise?
Request to, pursuant to Rule 133, I request to be excused from this vote.
The gentleman has that ability. Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the passage of the bill. The yeas were 151, the nays were 17. The bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 918. House Bill 918.
House Bill 918 by Representative Chokas, the 138th and others to be entitled an act to amend Title 31 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to health so as to provide for the establishment of the Georgia Rare Disease Advisory Council. This bill has been referred to the Committee on Health and Human Services. That committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
The chair recognizes Chairman Chokas to present the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring before you tonight, or this afternoon, HB 918. This measure simply creates the Georgia Rare Disease Advisory Council. A rare disease is defined as a disease that affects fewer than 200,000 people in the United States. There are more than 7,000 known rare diseases affecting approximately 25 to 30 million Americans, half of which are children. A state-based advisory council composed of qualified professionals and persons living with rare diseases and their caregivers could educate medical professionals, government agencies, legislators, and the public about the rare diseases and is an important public health issue and encourage research into the development of new ways to diagnose rare diseases. Madam Speaker, if there are no questions, I ask for everyone's favorable consideration to this issue.
There are no questions.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The gentleman has yielded the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All in favor of the passage of the bill will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no. And the clerk will unlock the machine. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas were 168, the nays were 1. The bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption, House Bill 1483, House Bill 1483.
House Bill 1483. By Representative Barton of the 5th, to be entitled an act to amend Article 1 of Chapter 10A of Title 43 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to licensing provisions regarding professional counselors, social workers, and marriage and family therapists, so as to provide for licensure by endorsement in social work. This bill having referred to the Committee on Health and Human Services, that committee recommends that this bill do pass.
Chair recognizes Representative Barton to present the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm presenting House Bill 1483. The purpose of this bill is to encourage more people into the field of social workers by reducing clinical supervised hours to become a licensed clinical social worker and add reciprocity to other states that have the same or more stringent requirements. This brings us more in line to surrounding states so we can be more competitive. With this changes, this in hopes to increase the workforce in the mental health profession. It also encourages the board to review their rules and regs during the remainder of this year to help streamline their process and seek input on ways to help increase the workforce. Madam Speaker, if I have any questions.
You do have questions. The chair recognizes Representative Earhart for a question.
Thank you. Will the gentleman yield?
Yes, ma'am.
Is it not true that this, in fact, is not your first bill, but the first bill of your legislative career was the bill that you presented last week?
You
and
are
is it
correct.
not further true that when your seatmate questioned you as to whether or not that was indeed your first bill, you may or may not have intentionally or unintentionally led her to believe that it was not? I surmise with the intention that you would avoid the attention that often comes with your first bill.
I was coy with my words with you. That is correct.
Is it not also true that your seatmate wishes to give you a belated congratulations on your first bill last week?
Thank you very much.
Chair recognizes Representative Gilligan for a question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. So as I'm reading this bill and understanding, what we're actually doing is cutting regulation, therefore cutting red tape. Am I reading this correct?
That is the way I read it too. Yes, ma'am.
Well, thank you for bringing the bill.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Wiedauer for a question.
Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir.
Is it not true that the deception that Representative Earhart discussed a minute ago gives me pause when considering how you presented this bill to the body?
No, sir.
I'll take that into consideration.
Madam Speaker, I yield the will.
The gentleman has yielded the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All in favor of the passage of the bill will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machine. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the passage of the bill. The yeas were 173, the nays were 0. The bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed.
Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 997.
House Bill 997 by Representative Watson of the 172nd and others, to be entitled an act to amend Part 1 of Article 2 of Chapter 5 of Title 4080 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to property tax exemptions, so as to provide for a statewide exemption from all ad valorem taxes for timber equipment and timber products held by timber producers. This bill having been referred to the Committee Ways and Means, that committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Chairman Watson to present the resolution or the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do bring before you HB 997. This is another forestry bill allowing us to request the people of Georgia to exempt the ad valorem taxes off of forestry equipment. Currently, some of the equipment is taxed, some of it is not. We're not real sure. But this is an industry that has been really impacted with inflation and the high cost of fuel, a shortage of truck drivers, and just a lot of their input costs continue to go up, but yet they're still getting the same, paid the same amount for what they do. This equipment sits in the woods. It never touches the road. A lot of times we don't even know it's there, and it depreciates really fast, so the value decreases on it really fast. And so that's why we're doing this, and I would just greatly appreciate your support, and I'll take any questions, Mr. Speaker, if there is.
You have a question if you care to yield.
I'll yield.
Chair recognizes Representative Washburn to your left for a question. Just a moment, Representative. All right. I can hardly hear the gentleman, and he's only a few feet from me.
Thank you, Mr.
Gentleman
Speaker.
may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir.
Is it not true that growing trees in Georgia is the same as growing any other crop?
It is, yes, sir.
And is it not true further that this is just a very fair bill to equalize and level the playing field with other agricultural equipment?
That is, you are correct. I farm here in the state of Georgia, and I do not pay ad valorem on my equipment.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Mr. Speaker, if there are no other questions, I'll yield.
You do have one more if you care to yield.
I'll take one more.
Chair recognizes Representative LaRicchia to your right for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Gentlemen, yield.
Yes, sir.
Is it not true that in agriculture being the #1 industry, that at $80 billion, forestry is right at $39 billion of that?
That's correct.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Greatly would appreciate everybody's support on this. This is great for our forestry industry and great for the loggers within that industry and all of the people in the industry. And thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield the will.
Gentleman yields the well, but we have another member that wished to be heard. Chair recognizes Representative Al Williams to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know you all realize how I hate to come to this well, but this bill is so important. It really should have come jointly with H.R. 686 because a lot is true of both of them. But I rise in support of it simply because one relative sticks out in my mind. His name was James Smith. In 1966, he was elected as the first African-American Justice of the Peace in South Georgia, when Justice Apices had a big role. Well, he was also in the logging business. And when he went into the logging business, you could go into the logging business for under $10,000. There were a lot of minority loggers, particularly in South Georgia. A Ford tractor, a pulley with a pair of tongs on it was literally all you needed, and you were in business. In today's market, and I have a friend of mine who called me about this bill, young minority logger, third generation, his father left him his operation. His skidder costs around $350,000. The tires, if he outfitted his skidder with tires, it would cost more than it cost my uncle to go into business. It's about $10,000. The taxes on the skidder, about $22,000 to $24,000, the taxes alone. It has taken a lot of small producers out of the business, much like it took a lot of small farmers. The cost of equipment. Many of you in here, if you, and I know a lot of folk have done their genealogy search, many of those logs processed in South Georgia was where your people came from and migrated to North Georgia. Many folk went to college because their uncle, their father, or somebody was in the logging business and could afford to help them go to school. It's an expensive business now, but there's still some small operators hanging on. You can't begin to imagine how important it is to a small producer to have a bill like this passed. The numbers are astronomical. We'll never go back to the way it was, but we can certainly help stop the decline of small producers from this business. This is a good bill. HB 997 truly returns some money to people who work hard in Georgia, because those of you that are not familiar with the logging business, trust me, it's still hard work. It used to be harder. You've never heard of somebody being bear caught. I know you hadn't heard that. But that was when a man worked so hard in the middle of the summer until his body was drained of sodium and cramps attacked him all over. All over. And to see somebody with 15 or 20 cramps simultaneously is quite a sight. This new equipment helped move the bear out of the woods. This is a good bill for small producers, and I urge you to support this bill to put them on parity with many other industries, or primarily agricultural business. They cost so much money to get in and stay in. I urge your support for this bill. With that, Mr. Speaker, I'll release the bill.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. What purpose does Representative Wade rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that at this hour the clerk of this house has gotten his second wind and we should all do the same?
I have asked him to ring the bell for a long, long time. A long time. Okay? Whether people get their bills passed or not. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the passage of House Bill 997. The ayes are 171, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 1425.
House Bill 1425 by Representative Werkheiser, the 157th, and others to be entitled an act to amend Article 9 of Chapter 12 of Title 16 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to access to medical cannabis, so as to authorize the governor to issue initial Class 1 and Class 2 production licenses for limited period of time. This bill having been referred to the Committee on Judiciary, that committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Chairman Werkheiser to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In my 8 years of presenting bills, I have never spent more than 60 seconds in the well. That changes today. First, I've got to thank some folks, and the first one's not even here, and I'm sure he's watching unless he's at a high-dollar golf tournament, and that's Alan Peak, who started this process years ago. But after that, when he left, Michael Gravely said he would take up the mantle and move this process forward. And this year we saw a couple other people put a lot of effort into this, and that's Chairman Powell and Chair Lady Sharon Cooper. And as we were going through this process trying to figure out what to do, the Speaker, as he often does on the big measures, got us all together. And I want to just pause here for a second and talk about something that, you know, corporations spend tens of thousands of dollars coming up with a logo or some kind of cute phrase to fit their organization. Then they try to meet that. The opposite happened in this House once this Speaker took charge, and that is the House leads. And I can just name you a few in the past few years. You know, when it came to adoption change, the House led. When it came to rape kit, elimination of the backlogs, the House led. When it came to mental health parity this year, the House led. And now it's our time to lead on medical marijuana. I wish I could say we're in a good spot, but we're not. We've had patients now numbering 20,000. We've got 20,000 families waiting for us to do something. If we do nothing, we're in a bad position. If we do something, it's not so great either. But I think we've got something that will move the process forward, and so I'm going to run through that. And again, I want to thank Gravely, Powell, Cooper, and the Speaker's office for this collaborative office, because this is not my bill. This is all of theirs. This legislation is aimed at resetting the medical marijuana license process to improve transparency and the professionalism of these operations. This issue is too important to get it wrong, and so this is what we're going to do. We're going to direct the Commission to immediately cancel the current RFP. That means there are no protests, there are no licenses. I guess we've literally created a time machine. We're going back about a year and a half. We're going to direct the Commission to immediately take steps to procure or obtain, no later than August 1st of this year, low THC oil in amounts necessary to meet the needs of the patients in this registry. This will kickstart the program and get it going while we fix these other things. It'll direct the commission to immediately take steps to provide for dispensing low THC oil to patients no later than August 15th. It will direct the commission to issue a new RFP after the above items are complete, but no later than December 31st of this year. It will require the RFP to be done a little bit differently. First of all, it's going to be managed by DOAS because this is something that they're used to doing. And then the scoring is going to be evaluated by independent third party. And then we're going to provide that the RFP be subject to state purchasing laws and open record laws, which still protects trade secrets and IP, intellectual property. As the previous RFP, it's going to provide for two Class 1 licenses and 4 Class 2 licenses. But so that we don't have to keep addressing this as the medical cards keeps growing, we're going to go ahead and say that as the registry increases by every 50,000 patients, we're going to allow an additional Class 1 license and an additional Class 2 license. There's going to be transparency throughout the process. It's going to require monthly updates to the Medical Cannabis Commission Oversight Committee. And then we're going to revise, since we're now behind schedule, revise dates for minority and women participation in the program. It's going to provide increased immunity for the commission and the designated universities for the transport. And then a year or so ago, Representative Walensky added ulcerative colitis to eligible conditions. The House passed that. The Senate removed it. We're going to put it back in. It reduces the distance from 3,000 to 2,000 feet for a license to be operational from a school, church, or synagogue, and then additional legislative findings. Mr. Speaker, that's the bill, and I'll stand for any questions.
Do you yield for questions?
Yes, sir.
Chair recognizes the minority leader, Leader Beverly, to your left for a question.
Does the gentleman yield?
Absolutely.
I just have a point of clarification. During the interim before the Class 1 and Class 2 licenses go out for RFP, there's an interim quantity of medical marijuana that needs to be produced. Is that going to be sole sourced, or is it going to be someone who's already bid on that to provide the minimum amount of medical marijuana for the patients who need it?
I mean, for the oil that the commission's going to be allowed to
Correct.
get,
Yes.
it will not be sourced from any of the current licensee holders, since there are none. So they'll have to procure them from either other sources or governments.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Do you further yield?
Yes, sir.
Chair recognizes the Dean of this House, Dean Smyrie, to your left for a question.
Gentleman Yelwood.
Yes, sir.
Let me ask you something. In terms of the licensures that are existing now, will they have to reapply, but they won't have, will they have to pay again? I mean, explain that process.
Yeah, that's a great question. Appreciate you bringing that up. And unfortunately, we've got a couple of licensee holders that have not been signed that have invested a lot of money. So they will, in fact, be treated like everyone else and have to reapply. But in the bill, we have exempted them from paying any fees because there is a hefty application fee. So anybody who's already paid that fee will be exempt from paying that fee. But to the first part of your question, so yes, they will have to reapply like everyone else.
Gentleman, further yield?
Absolutely.
In the Class 1 and the Class 2, the way we had it the last time, you know, delineate this time, you said that was 12.
No, it's still 2 Class 1 and 4 Class 2.
Okay, so the number will stay the same.
That is correct.
Okay, I misunderstood. I thought that we were changing the number and upping it, the eligibility or the requirements for the license, but the license was
not until we add until the medical card holders reach 50,000 will we not add to that again.
And then one last question.
Yeah.
Under the auspices of the university system, UGA and Fort Valley State, they will authorize a licensure under the statute as well. They will continue to proceed in terms of their application. They won't have to reapply.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Do you further yield?
Yes, sir.
Chair recognizes Representative Gilliard to your left for a question.
Will the gentleman yield?
Yes.
Thank you for this bill. You mentioned about minority and women participation. Can you further elaborate on that?
Yeah, in the previous RFP, we had stipulations for that, and that will continue in the new RFP. So what we did, after there's been some period of seeing how they've operated, and I understand the licensees that were supposedly awarded, they had that already in there, and their scores were elevated for having that. But what this study will do, it's going to look back and see, and if there is not adequate minority or women participation, we will grant a license in addition without reaching the 50,000 threshold, so that we do meet those qualifications.
Does the gentleman further yield?
Yes.
Which department would this actually go through? Would it be agriculture?
DOAS.
Okay. Would the gentleman further yield for
Yes.
one more question? When we did House Bill 213, the hemp industry, there was probably a concern about minority participation. And so I thank you for this bill. It's a good bill, and just encourage that we further follow up on holding that to be true.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you further yield?
I'll take one more because I know there's some other speakers who want to speak to this.
Chair recognizes Representative Dukes to your left for a question.
Would the gentleman yield, please?
Yes.
Is it not true that we are continuing the same process, except rather than it being handled by the commission, that it is now being handled by DOAS?
Well, the commission is still involved, but the scoring and application after the commission releases the RFP, that's when DOAS and a third-party scorer steps in, but the commission is still in place.
Would the gentleman further yield?
Yes.
Inasmuch as it was as much confusion around the mechanism of selection, was any thought given to a different process?
Well, there's been thoughts about every phase of this, but I'll tell you this, I know the commission's taken a lot of hits. That commission is made up of some very intellectual, very successful people. Part of that process, that ownership goes on the legislature for not having the guardrails in place, and I think we've done that in this bill. Mr. Speaker, at this point, I'm going to yield the well and let those others speak to this bill. Thank you.
Okay, we have other members that wish to speak to the bill. Chair recognizes Chairman Setzler to speak to the bill.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I rise today. I'd like to start by thanking the Speaker. The Speaker's dialed back in a process that I think was spiraling out of control. I think the proposal that had been brought that would have expanded the number of producers to more than 20 was kind of a runaway train, and I appreciate what the Speaker's done to dial this back. It's limited to the number of providers that was initially proposed, and I think I just want to make that statement here, that what we have before us is better than what had been proposed. I'd like to thank the Speaker for that. Having said that, I want us to understand what we're doing here, and what we're doing is, in this bill, moving a step forward in a process that I think is dramatically different than what this body acted on 7 years ago when we passed the Haley's Hope Act in 2015 that was going to provide small quantities of low THC oil to address kids with acute medical conditions and focus on their conditions specifically. I think many of us came together then and passed a bill that we can feel good about because small quantities of low THC oil for acute conditions is something I think we can all be very proud of. But let me say without any uncertainty in my mind, and I think I want to make this clear for Georgians, and I want to make this clear for this body, what is before us today, we're a part of it. This is a process. The fact that we're in the face of a protest where 22 providers came in to provide oil-based THC to Georgians, the fight here is one of making money on producing this. Now, I'm a supporter of the free enterprise system, and I believe with the free enterprise delivery system is an efficient, appropriate way to deliver services. But make no mistake about it, friends. What we have before us, not specifically in this bill, but in this movement towards expansion of legalized marijuana and THC in the state is something we need to be very cautious about. Again, I appreciate the constraints that leadership's put on this bill before us. I think it's a better bill than what was being proposed. But I want to say to Georgians and I want to say to this body, we need to be very, very careful. The monetization of THC, whether it's an oil-based form or the expectation in the future of it being a smoked form, is what's happening behind the scenes and what's happening below the radar screen. I want to caution us, this body, if we're going to be wise, needs to continue to put constraints on the use of low THC oil so it can be used for specifically medicinal purposes at low concentrations for specifically acute conditions. I'll close by saying a couple years ago in the Judiciary Non-Civil Committee, we had a bill that came through purported as a low THC bill that would have allowed for, again, it was called a low THC oil bill, but it would have allowed for up to 20 ounces of 60 to 80% pure THC honey oil to be used at a street value of more than $30,000 in that quantity. That's what that could be bought for for its street value. That was what was being proposed to our Judiciary Committee as low THC oil. Friends, there is a movement behind the scenes, and it's very soon going to be out in the open, that's going to be monetizing this process to push for full-on what you would call medical/recreational marijuana and making Georgia a recreational state. That's coming. The money behind this that's protesting these RFPs is driving this. It's a nationwide movement, and it is coming to Georgia, and they see this process as just a step in that direction. To build the infrastructure, to build the providers, to expand the providers so that we can have full-on what they originally called medical marijuana, which was any doctor who believes the legalization of marijuana can write a script to let folks have marijuana, and then behind that full-on legalization. So friends, let's not be fooled by this. I think the Speaker and the leadership has done a great job of constraining the bill that's before us, and I commend the House for that. But make no mistake about it, we are taking steps towards setting up the financial infrastructure to create a lobby and a financial set of interests that will drive through recreational marijuana in this state, and for that we all need to be very, very, very concerned and vote cautiously as we vote on this proposition today. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Chairman Alan Powell to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and ladies and gentlemen of the House. After I listened to that last speech, I'm not sure if he was for it or against it. Yeah. But I will certainly tell you the same thing I've always said, and said it back prior to the legislation 3 years ago, that anything that the good Lord lets grow natural's got to be better for something made better than some drug made in some factory, folks. Now, where are we at today? I thought Chairman Werkheiser did a pretty good job explaining the bill, and I'll get into some other parts of how this came to be. But I want to talk about what this is really about. And it's really about those children and those sick individuals. Y'all remember, all of y'all who were here 3 years ago, do y'all remember the balconies being full of children that suffered from seizures? from illnesses. This is what this legislation is about. And why is it here today? It's here today because the absolute worst, the absolute most terrible part of government bureaucracy is what transpired over the last 3 years. The Cannabis Commission was established. The governor made his appointments, and Speaker made his, and the late governor made his, and I'm not sure what happened in between, but to the best of my knowledge, it was absolutely disgraceful. Disgraceful to the people of this state. When we got started into this issue back in November, your Regulated Industry Committee had hearings during the reapportionment, and we just casually asked the director of the Cannabis Commission to come over and testify so we could get a little information about what was taking so long. Let me tell you something. If you've never been insulted, you need to sit in the chairman's position and assemble your committee and ask a state bureaucrat questions. That was the worst I've ever seen. You ask him, what was their process? I can't tell you. We aren't allowed to talk about it because it was hidden and embedded in the legislation that said we can't discuss nor disclose, or there was no open sunshine into the process. We asked a number of questions. Finally, I gave up and I said, well, can you ask one question? Can you tell me if y'all used any third-party consultants? Can't answer that question. What color is the sky? I can't answer the question, folks. And this is where they were. And that prompted a level of investigation and that came on behalf of the committee. A lot of y'all that know me, I'm not very much about asking questions and not getting answers. Yes, me, Al. But also, this represented an insult to this house, the people's house. That we were the front runner on this issue about medical cannabis oil to help these sick people in our state. We started work on the committee, and we looked into it, and we started realizing what a complicated situation because of the legal community. Under the terms of the law of 3 years ago, it said that there would be 6 licensees, 2 Class 1, 100,000 square foot, 4 Class 2, 50,000. And we're not talking about chump change that was involved in it. We're talking about $100,000 license applications for one and $50,000 for the other. We're talking about the consultants out there who put together these intricate sets of blueprints and plans that would be submitted per the instructions of the Cannabis Commission, whether it was about minority participation or about the security or about the financial well-being or about where they were going to be located, and you name it, and it was there. Again, best I can tell you, an insult to the people of this state. They've dragged on for 3 years. So when we started looking at it, we found out that the Cannabis Commission had gone through some kind of a process to evaluate the applications. There were 69 applications. And they went through this application process, and as God is my witness, I don't think I've ever seen anything as terrible as what we found out. And how we found out wasn't from the commission, and it wasn't from the people, the 6 that were tentatively approved. It was from the 16 plus that either filed a protest or the others who just walked away because they threw their hands up at it. Folks, we don't do business like that in the state of Georgia. We don't. But this process, if you can imagine this, they divvied up the contracts and the requirements into sections. And they gave each one of the 6 commissioners a little section, and they said, you judge this and put a numerical value on it. They didn't look at the rest of it, and then they tossed it in the pie and they added it up. I smell a rat in the woodpile, folks, because something told me that this thing was destined for hand-picked folks. But that's how it was. So you had 6 companies 6 of the companies that had been tentatively approved. You had 16 of the companies that in the original legislation, they had grounds to file a protest. And we had 16 that filed a protest, and pending legislation, since they were the only ones that we were told that would have legal standing, that these 16s would be filing legal litigation based on the failure of due process of the application evaluation process. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but that sounds pretty rich to me, folks, you know? Sounded pretty fair, because I didn't just get that from the attorneys representing the protesters. I got this, the committee got this information from litigant attorneys that had nothing to do with it, that said that yes, it would. And we realized at that point that what we were looking at was that that process, if once litigation was filed, it'd be filed in Fulton County, it would come up at some point down the road, go through the Court of Appeal. So we were told that we could be looking at 3.5, 4, 5, 6 years to be embroiled in litigation. The same as a lot of other states that went through this, strange enough. So we came up with an idea, well, let's short circuit the idea. Let's just give the protesters licenses. That's the only way that we knew to do it, because the 6 that had been tentatively chosen, we didn't want to get into their rights so that we give them reason for litigation. So, you know, we did a lot of things. We opened it up. We did away with the secrecy clause. We opened it up so the sunshine could peek in, so that them folks back there in that glassed-in room and them folks you see on TV that's been reporting all of this, that they might could get involved and start asking questions to ferret out what was really going on. This is the direction that we went on 1400. My colleague, Ms. Cooper, put in a bill that had somewhat of a different approach to it. Her approach was to let the Medical Association of Georgia have control of compliance and the list and all of that of the actual folks who were filing to get the medical cards. And hers even went as far as to add 6 more, something I disagreed with. But, you know, you had 3 different chairmen in this House. We all had a different approach. Chairman Workhauser, he put in one that said the governor could pick one or ever how many number of the 6 to go ahead and get it started, because this has been dragging on way too long. So then you had the wisdom of the Speaker's office. They called it in. They looked at it. They are the attorneys. I'm not an attorney. I actually work for, I'm sorry. I'm not an attorney. I rely on attorneys. But the Speaker's office drafted this document in front of you. And what this document does, as I was so aptly told by one of my friends in there, this ain't gonna make anybody happy. Well, it hadn't, but it's almost humorous to me that the folks out there that had been petitioning, that they were pretty full of themselves because they were tentatively approved. They didn't even want to talk to us. By gosh, they wanted to talk now. But this document that you see in front of you that was crafted as a substitute that came out of the Speaker's office, it does away with the RFP. It starts back to scratch. Now, as I said, I'm not a lawyer, and I don't know if this is going to produce litigation or not. But I know that this is probably the fairest thing to do. It would be the fairest thing to do, because those six, they're going to have to reapply. The 16 that filed a protest, they're going to have a chance to be reevaluated. The other 40-something are going to be reevaluated, and then somewhere out there, maybe that guy that, maybe the folks that played the ukulele in the committee for us, they might even put in an application, the people from wherever they're from, because this opens the process back up. But most important, ladies and gentlemen, what it does, it moves this process out from a bunch of appointed folks, and it moves it into the hands of the professionals at the Department of Administrative Services. and they will hire third-party consultants to evaluate any and all, and they've got a time limit to get on moving. They'll have to issue a new RFP before the end of the year. That, ladies and gentlemen, is what this does. I applaud the Speaker's office. I had a lot of y'all out there that asked me what my thoughts was. I said, by all means, vote for this. Let's get it on across. You know, we've got a little bit of time because we're going to have to deal with that crowd across the hall. And if they can file up something, they're going to do their best to do it. So maybe if we get it on over there, we can get moving. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would ask for your support for this substitute. And let's move on and let's see if we can get this system repaired and in order for the people that are deserving it. Mr. Speaker, I'll yield the well.
Chair recognizes Representative Gravely to speak to the bill.
Tough act to follow. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to very quickly talk about, we've talked a lot about bureaucracy. We've talked a lot about fines and fees and applications up here, and I want to take you back to a moment in 2014 where those of you who sat in this House and this issue was being debated from this floor by then Representative Alan Peake, many of you really had a battle over whether or not this was appropriate. This was a controversial issue. This was an issue that we had multiple caucus meetings over. The hallways were filled, news articles were being ran on a measure that Georgia had passed in 1979. First time. We were one of the original states. And it didn't start in 2013 and 14. It started in 1979 and 1980. And it was started by a woman by the name of Mona Taft, who was advocating on her husband, or for her husband, because he had cancer. And she found out that he had gotten relief from this. So she came up here. His name was Harris Taft. And, the irony is that we sat and worried about this issue in 2014. But let me tell you what happens in just 10 short years. We have not become a recreational state. We have not implemented medical smoking or anything like that. Matter of fact, we have a very strict law. You can't even advertise with the color green in our law. There are no edibles in our law. You can't even have a standalone education center in our laws. For anyone that would want a patient seeking this who has been recommended by their physician, who's wanting education on this particular subject, you can't even have a standalone education center. Ladies and gentlemen, in 2014, we struggled. And this was a brave and courageous vote by a lot of you. But today, we stand here in this same chamber, everyone in agreement, how do we get this to the children? How do we get this to my constituents? Because over the last 10 years, we have realized that there are constituents in just about every one of your districts that needs this. Yes, it did start out with some children and their parents that came to the balcony, they came to the rotunda. But friends, I'm going to tell you, this affects young and old. Look at our the diagnosis that we have in our law. Children don't get Parkinson's disease. How many people suffer from MS, Tourette's, sickle cell anemia, ulcerative colitis? There's a lot of people in this state that will benefit. So I want to make sure that we understand this process does not change the minority aspect. The inclusion of minority companies does not change that. Matter of fact, it puts an onus on Fort Valley State to go ahead and get moving. It puts the onus
to let's get this moving forward now. Now, the previous speakers were correct. The voting or the application process was tainted. Should they have hired a third party? Yes. Should that have been taken care of already? Yes. This time it will be. And those 69 companies that went through the application process will not be charged again. They will go through, they will be voted, and it will be a clean voting process. It will be a clean grading process. But folks, I want to leave you with this. 20,000 peer-reviewed medical journals have been written on the efficacy of this substance. 20,000. Our Medical Association of Georgia has created its own internal review committee because the doctors in the Medical Association realized that more and more and more of their patients were finding relief, were finding positive effects from this. And the doctors wanted to know more. They want to be able to have that ability to sit down with their patient and discuss this openly and freely. Friends, I'll tell you, last night we had a town hall meeting. Myself, Representative Momtahan, Representative Gullett. We were very blessed to have Representative Irwin, our chairwoman, Rich, come out to us. And at the end of that, a gentleman running for county commission in my district, 47 years old, stopped me at the end of that. It was a totally different subject that the town hall meeting was being presented on. And he said, I want to thank you for your work on this, because in 2005, I was diagnosed with leukemia. And I went out to Colorado, and I would stay for 5 days, and it was it wasn't confirmed in anything. It was just an opportunity that a doctor had told me about. He said, but today I'm alive and well. And I attribute that to those treatments that I took with medical cannabis in Colorado in 2005 and 6, long before we were discussing it in present day here in our state. Ladies and gentlemen, there are families in this state that needed this 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And now all of us are trying to figure out a way to move it forward. I thank the speaker, and I want to credit the speaker with this. From day one, the speaker has been with us. From day one, the speaker has helped lead the charge. From day one, he has set, and just like everybody else that was involved in this issue in the beginning, he has racked his mind, his brain, in trying to figure out a solution. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for that. So this bill moves it forward in a clean process to be able to get this. It's got dates that are implemented. It looks at the open records problems that the previous bill apparently had, although I do not believe that was the legislative intent. It apparently had some. I would ask for your favorable consideration on this measure so that we can do something in this state 10 years later to get these folks the medicine that they need. Mr. Speaker, thank you. I yield the well.
Gentleman has yielded the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. What purpose does Chairman Houston rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, isn't it not true that my heart goes out to these children and I'm for the bill, but after I voted for the last bill, isn't it not true that on lines 24 regarding legislators can own 5% of this, no more than 5%? I didn't realize that was in the bill before. And is it not true? Would somebody explain that to me?
Well, the fellow sitting to your right there might take a shot at it.
I wave.
He waves.
And I'm not going to give you a high five on that one. Isn't it not true that I think that this is some way a great opportunity that we can get this cleared up, that legislators, this is big business that we're voting on, and legislators should not have 5% of it. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Chairman Carpenter. Or what purpose do you rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Is it not true there's a lot of talk about how tight the language is on this bill, but it does not, it pales in comparison to how tight the supply of this oil is for the consumers of Georgia?
I would agree with that. What purpose does Dean Smyrie rise? He waves. What purpose does Representative McLeod rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Isn't it true that I was born in the island of Jamaica?
If the lady so states.
And as such, we have been accustomed to making sure that medical marijuana has always been in good use.
I'll take the lady's word for it. What purpose does Representative Erica Thomas rise?
Is it not true that I don't want to go?
What purpose do you rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that I don't want to go after Representative McLeod's statement? But I do have a question. My parliamentary inquiry is just to ask a question and make a comment, and that is saying that in this bill, it would be getting rid of the last 6 licenses and giving out 6 new licenses that would make a independent consultant to be able to make the decision to the board whether or not they believe that the 6 new licenses should be given out.
Well, I think they'd be making a recommendation based on some established criteria.
Further inquiry?
State your inquiry.
Is it not also true that with lines 76 through 81, it does state, which is my question in the committee was, it does state that this would still be able to have the 6 licenses would have the privacy and the exemptions that they were able to keep before?
Well, no, there are not 6 licenses now. The licenses have not been issued other than to the Fort Valley State as the license. That's the only license that's been issued. The 6 that were the successful bidders have not been awarded a license.
Thank you.
What purpose, we're just going to do 1 or 2 more of these and then we're going to lock it down. What purpose does Chairman Setzler rise?
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr.
State
Speaker.
your inquiry.
Isn't it true that if there's skeptics in this whole process, this bill actually puts more integrity in the process and brings this whole process back to where the original intent of the legislature was, which is a limited circumstance to provide low THC oil?
Well, that was certainly the intent.
Thank you,
So, what purpose does Representative Gravely rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that had the commission been able to hire a third-party consultant at the original application process, that we would not have had to go through the extent of protests that we did currently, or that we are going through currently?
The chair feels like the gentleman is accurate in that statement.
Further inquiry, please.
State your inquiry.
That these consulting firms that DOAS would work with have graded other applications in other states, that they are attuned with what these companies need to do from a security standpoint, a harvesting standpoint, that these companies' sole purpose are to grade applications in this manner across other states to make sure that these states are getting good companies to make medicine.
That's my understanding. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the passage of House Bill 1425, the ayes are 169, the nays are 5. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 1390.
House Bill 1390 by Representative Anulowicz, the 42nd, and others to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 5 of Title 34 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to sex discrimination in employment so as to provide for a right of action against a county or city employer for retaliation. This bill having referred to the Committee on Industry and Labor, that committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Representative Anulowicz to present the bill.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise before you right now to present House Bill 1390. This is a bipartisan bill, and it is truly the result of a tremendous amount of collaboration, bipartisan collaboration here in this chamber and in the committee process. This bill is pretty straightforward. It gives city, county, and consolidated government employees a right of action against their employer if they are retaliated against in their workplace after they make a claim of or report sexual harassment. This bill has the full support of ACCG and GMA. This bill passed the House Judiciary Committee unanimously, and I hope to have your favorable support this afternoon. But before we do that, I want to take a moment to again thank everyone involved with all of the work that went into getting this bill here today. And I want to especially mention one woman in particular. This bill, I think, is going to help a lot of people in the state of Georgia, but I want to take a moment to mention Captain Tanya Gilavani in the Lawrenceville Police Department. She is not able to speak for herself. She was not able to come and attend these hearings, but she is someone who has experienced this kind of retaliation, and she is in my heart today as I present this bill to you. Again, I ask for your favorable consideration. Thank you.
Do you yield for a question?
I do, yes.
Chair recognizes Representative McLeod to your left for a question.
Does a gentle lady yield?
Yes, I do.
I'm personally know Tanya myself. In fact, she called me as a whistleblower. So thank you for bringing this bill. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Do you further yield?
Yes, sir.
Chair recognizes Representative Cannon to your left for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Do you yield?
Yes, I do.
Thank you so much for this bill. I wanted to bring to light that these conversations have been happening as whisper campaigns over the years, and as many, women and LGBTQ elected officials, we've seen these issues happen in state government. But today, I wanted to ask, how does this impact those who might be pregnant or experiencing pregnancy?
That's a good question. This bill is actually specific to sexual harassment. There is another piece of legislation that I have been working on with the same group of stakeholders, and I am very optimistic and confident that work on that bill that actually does include pregnancy protections will continue throughout the summer, and that I'll be able to introduce that during the upcoming legislative session.
Do you further yield?
Yes, sir, I yield.
Chair recognizes Representative Maynard to your right for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does this bill, is it retroactive in any way?
Unfortunately, I don't think it's retroactive, but I appreciate that question. Thank you.
No further questions.
Thank you, everyone.
Lady has yielded the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machine. Why did you quit? Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the passage of House Bill 1390, the ayes are 172, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. What purpose does Chairman Collins rise?
To make a motion.
State your motion.
I ask that House Bill 1387 be recommitted to rules.
Chairman Collins has moved that House Bill 1387 be recommitted to the Rules Committee. Clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 1387 by Representative Collins of the 68th and others be entitled an act to amend Title 40 of the Official Code of Georgia Antietam relating motor vehicles traffic so to provide for the suspension of a motor vehicle registration upon the failure to pay a civil monetary penalty.
On the gentleman's motion that House Bill 1387 be recommitted to rules, is there objection? Chair hears none, and it is so ordered. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 830.
House Bill 830 by Representative Irwin of the 28th to be entitled an act to amend Article 1 of Chapter 16 to Title 15 of the Official Code of Georgia Antietam relating to general provisions regarding sheriffs so as to repeal provisions limiting sheriffs to one additional salary for serving as a sheriff of multiple courts. This bill having been referred to the Committee on Public Safety and Homeland Security, that committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Representative Irwin to present the bill.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Speaker and colleagues. I bring before you House Bill 830. It updates our general law concerning the minimum salaries of our sheriffs. Sheriff's minimum salaries are determined by 4 different categories. First, your county's population, years of service for your sheriff, state-mandated COLAs, state-mandated supplements for serving one court in addition to Superior Court. House Bill 830 seeks to authorize minimum salary supplements for serving 2 courts. So if you read the bill, you'll see we changed from giving a supplement for 1 court above Superior Court to 2 courts above. That supplement amount is per sheriff would be $4,630 per sheriff over the course of the year. So the supplement, I'd like to point out that we currently pay our clerks of courts to work they get a supplement, the same supplement in law for all 4 courts. If they have 4 courts, that includes the state court, then they get a supplement for 4 courts in their county. And, pretty simple bill there, trying to support our sheriffs. I did a little bit of a deep dive into looking what we require of our sheriffs. And I pulled out a manual for them that we have for them here, which is the Office of the Sheriff in Georgia. It's the handbook for Georgia sheriffs. It's 140 pages long. So what I want to point out to you is that there is quite a bit that our sheriffs do for this state of Georgia every single day. And last time I checked, our sheriffs don't go off the clock on Saturday afternoon or after 5 o'clock. They're working 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and they're trying to assist our communities on a regular basis, you could imagine, which many of us go home to our families. A lot of times our families are concerned about our sheriffs, or their families are, as they leave, you could imagine, to not only help with a situation that has occurred, but the fact that they put their lives on the line. So, Mr. Speaker, what I'd like to do is ask for favorable consideration of House Bill 830, and I'll yield for questions.
Chair recognizes Representative Saines to your right for a question.
Does the gentleman yield?
I do.
Is it not true that there's been Georgia sheriffs and those deputies who've been injured or lost their lives while protecting courts in the state in recent years, and this bill looks to fairly compensate them like the author said, like the Superior Court clerk.
There has been, and you're correct there.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Cannon to your left for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Do you yield?
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to understand on line 15, and of course, because sheriffs are of the county, it says that the county will be responsible for these funds. So can you speak to some of the counties that you have spoken to and how they plan to come up with this $385.90?
Some of my counties, one of the counties that I've spoken to is the one that I live in there, and obviously we dictate how sheriffs are paid in the state, but the counties fund those salaries. They also can provide a local supplement on top of that, and many sheriffs receive even more above the minimum salary here. But that my county's going to absorb it through the county budget that they have, just like they would if there was increased fuel costs.
And a further question, do you
Yes, ma'am.
yield?
Yes,
So
ma'am.
you spoke to the county that you represent. My question is if you spoke to any other counties, perhaps Fulton County, the state's largest county?
I did not.
And one further question, if you further yield?
I do.
And so the issue is that you're saying that there are already individuals who might be eligible for this, and so this is why we're looking for this solution, I'm assuming. So how many people do you think that this would impact in your county or in Fulton County?
It's only one person in every county, and we currently have 159 sheriffs over the state. The total state impact of this, I believe, if I can see the number, is somewhere near $736,000 spread out over 159 counties with those sheriffs.
Do you yield for another question?
Yes, sir.
Chair recognizes Representative Lott to your right for a question.
Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, ma'am.
Is it not true that if the sheriff does not cover those courts, that they have to outsource that, the coverage?
That is true. And that'd be a cost to the counties too.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. With that,
No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We'll yield the will and ask for your favorable consideration for our sheriffs.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. And the clerk will unlock the machines. What purpose does Representative McLaurin rise?
To make a motion, Mr. Speaker.
I'm not going to recognize you till you come up here and have a chat with me.
Would love to.
Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the passage of House Bill 830, the ayes are 170. The nays are 1. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 1068.
House Bill 1068 by Representative Leverett of the 33rd to be entitled an act to amend Article 2, Chapter 21 and Title 50 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to state tort claims so as to revise provisions regarding service process. This bill having referred to the Committee on Judiciary, that committee recommends that this bill do pass by Rules Committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Representative Leverett to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I would ask your favorable support this evening for House Bill 1068. This bill proposes a very practical solution to a very practical problem. If you have a claim against the state that you try to take to court, you have to notify the state of the pendency of that case in two different ways. You have to personally deliver to the chief executive officer of the agency affected a copy of the complaint, and also have to deliver a copy to the risk management director of the Department of Administrative Services. Of course, those two people are very busy and they're not always in their office, so sometimes these cases go a while without being properly served or delivered. To address that problem, all agencies in DOAS have designated people who will be in the office to receive process. The problem is there's no foundation for that in the law. The law doesn't really allow that. Well, House Bill 1068 would expressly make that part of the statute so that these agencies could do that. It would also require them to be present at least 3 days out of the week so they could receive the papers when they are brought to those offices, and it would require they post on their websites the name and identity of the person to be served. And finally, it also and it confirms they need to be in the office 3 days a week, and they already addressed that. So it's just a very simple solution to what is a very practical kind of problem. So, Mr. Speaker, I'll yield the well for any questions.
You have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I ask your favorable consideration of House Bill 1068. Now I'll yield the well.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to withdrawing the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is withdrawn. Is there any objection to adopting the substitute offered by the Committee on Rules? The chair hears none. The Rules Committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the passage of House Bill 1068, the ayes are 166, the nays are 2. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. What purpose does Representative McLaurin rise?
To make a motion,
State
Mr.
your
Speaker.
motion.
Whereas the clerk of the House has ably demonstrated his commitment to the letter of Rule 139.3 concerning the length of time machines must stay open, I move that the rules of the House be temporarily suspended for the rest of the legislative day to allow for the machine to be unlocked only for a period of 30 seconds, Mr. Speaker.
All right, the gentleman has made a motion. What purpose does Representative Williamson rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, is it not true that the 1963 song done by the Safaris with the famous solo of Wipeout, that drum solo, that our clerk is right up there with a momentous, so I second the gentleman's motion.
Seconds the motion. What purpose does Representative Singleton rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that while I do appreciate the House following its own rules, I support Representative McLaurin's decision, and I think 30 seconds would be great, and I'm just glad we're following our rules. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I think that's amazing of you. So all those in favor of the McLaurin motion to suspend the rules will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the gentleman's motion, the ayes are 130, the nays are 37. The motion, having received a 2/3 vote, is thereby carried. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 1335. What purpose does Representative Mary Frances Williams rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Does this mean we only have 30 seconds to run to our desk from anywhere on the floor? Or the bathroom, excuse me, ladies' room?
Well, the converse of that is while we're voting, you need to stay close by. We got a big calendar.
Yes, sir.
The answer is yes.
I would give that.
The motion was adopted. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 1335.
House Bill 1335 by Representative Smiley, 135th and others be entitled an act to amend Chapter 4, Title 1 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to holidays and observances so as to provide for Public Safety Week. This bill having been referred to the Committee on Rules. That committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes the Dean of this House, Dean Smiley, to present the bill.
Mr. Speaker and ladies and gentlemen of the House, House Bill 1335 was a bill that would declare Public Safety Week in Georgia during the week of September the 11th, and that was a bill sponsored by the Columbus delegation. Our City Council and Mayor asked us to pass this, and subsequently a substitute was added in Chairman Smith in the Rules Committee, and it was originally carried by the floor leader, Lauren McDonald, and also Representative Miriam Parrish had a bill as well. And what this bill does, currently the state requires 12 holidays by statute and 10 federal holidays and 2 floating holidays that the governor can set in observance of either Robert E. Lee, Confederate Memorial, or Jefferson Davis birthday. What this bill does, it updates a provision that requires the state to recognize all federal holidays, and Congress has adopted a holiday schedule that requires Juneteenth to be a holiday. What we're doing is recognizing all the federal holidays as of January 1, 2022. If you see in the bill, it says January 1, 1984, and that was the year we passed the Martin Luther King state holiday bill because Congress had also adopted it as a federal holiday, and we followed suit and created it as a state holiday. And the only person that was here when we did that was Joe Green, Representative Green, and myself, and we created that. So the state holidays that will be recognized in And 2022 will be New Year's Day, Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, President's Day, Memorial Day, Juneteenth, Independence Day, Labor Day, Columbus Day, Veterans Day, Thanksgiving Day, and Christmas Day. And then we'll have 2 floating state holidays. So, Mr. Speaker, that's the essence of this bill, creating a state holiday and requiring the state to go from 12 to 13, and that's all it does. No question, Mr. Speaker?
You have a couple of questions if you yield.
Yes, sir, I'll yield.
Chair recognizes Representative Walensky to your left for a question.
Thank you, Speaker. Does the Dean yield?
Yes.
Dean, I just wanted to let you know that it's been one of the honors of my life to serve with you, and you asked the first question in my first bill, so I'm going to return the favor and ask you, how do you feel?
I feel good.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, you know how Jane Brown's, I feel good. And it's almost dinner time. And since Sharon Beasley Teague is not here, Mr. Speaker, I think it's dinner time, as she would say.
Representative Stacey Evans will handle that announcement later. Do you further yield?
Yes, sir. One more, Mr. Speaker. It's
Chair
time for dinner.
recognizes Representative McDonald to your left for a question.
Does the Dean yield?
Yes,
Was it a true honor for me to work with you on this bill?
I've been knowing you a long time. I remember when you first was born. I remember that.
Does the gentleman further yield?
Yes, sir.
It's a true honor. 47 years ago, when I was 6 years old, running around chaotic on this floor, that I got to sit in your lap.
Well, I don't know about a lap dance. But yeah, you might have sat in the chair next to me. But I want to say this to you, that your father done good, and I remember serving with your father, who was a very noble gentleman, and he raised a great son. So thank you for that question. Is that it, Mr. Speaker?
You have others if you care to yield.
I think it's dinner time, Mr. Speaker.
It's getting awfully close.
All right, I yield the will, Mr. Speaker, and appreciate your consideration of House Bill 1335.
The distinguished gentleman, has yielded the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machine. What purpose does Representative Paris rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Isn't it not true that after 3 years of working on this bill, I am so happy to see it finally pass? Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
I'm sure you are. Have all members voted? What purpose does Representative Cannon rise?
Parliamentary
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that I'm concerned about the versions of the bills that we have here? I'm trying to get an understanding of what LC number we're working with, which substitute. As much as I might be in support of this measure, I'm concerned that I can't get a clear answer from any of the sponsors, and it clearly only lists Public Safety Week. Is it not true?
Well, let's find out. What purpose does Chairman Dean Smyrie rise?
Mr. Speaker, it's not true that on line 19 through 22 it states that the governor has authorization to update the number of holidays that the state must observe, and it will go from 12 to 13. It will create another additional holiday. Is that not correct?
That is correct. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the passage of House Bill 1335. The ayes are 152, the nays are 2. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 972.
House Bill 972 by Representative Belton of the 112th to be entitled an act to amend Article 1 of Chapter 10A of Title 43 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to licensing provisions regarding professional counselors, social workers, and marriage and family counselors, so as to change certain definitions to provide for additional member to the Georgia Composite Board of Professional Counselors, Social Workers, and Marriage Family Therapists. This bill having been referred to the Committee on Regulated Industries. That committee recommends this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Chairman Belton to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the spirit of House Bill 1013, the excellent work the Speaker has done, the Governor as well, of making mental health more accessible to Georgia, I present House Bill 972. It's a cleanup from a 1985 law. By cleaning up this statute, we're able to immediately bring 1,700 more counselors in Georgia. We've talked to the psychologists, hospitals, the faith community, the preachers, the university, DHS, other state departments. A lot of people have done a lot of work to make this bill possible, and I ask for your favorable consideration. I yield for questions.
You have no questions.
I yield the well.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines on the passage of House Bill 972. The ayes are 165, the nays are 1. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Chair recognizes the chairman of the House Rules Committee for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Rules Committee will meet at 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock.
Chair recognizes Representative Jasmine Clark for an announcement.
Just an announcement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Please join us on Wednesday, March 16th, so that's tomorrow, for an Asian Justice Rally 1 year after the Atlanta Asian shooting, tomorrow at the Railroad Freight Depot from 11:30 a.m. to 2 p.m. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Chairman Mitchell for an announcement.
The Democratic Caucus will meet in 502 in the CLOB upon this break. 502, there will be dinner served as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I've been asked to announce, now this is the most important announcement you'll hear. In room 216, There will be hamburgers for members and staff of the House, maybe the General Assembly, I don't know. I don't know if the Senate's getting any food or not, but 216 will have hamburgers for dinner. And with that, you heard the announcement about the Rules Committee meeting at 6. We will be in recess for dinner until 7:15.